It was a peaceful morning in the hillside village of Elmsworth. The air smelled of freshly baked bread, and the sun peeked through the mist that rolled over the hills. Children walked to school, shopkeepers opened their doors, and stray dogs wandered lazily through the cobbled streets. Among them were two inseparable dogs. One was a brown mutt with a thick coat and tired eyes. The other, leaner with a bright white streak running down his nose, followed close beside him. The villagers often saw them together and had nicknamed them Bruno and Scout. At precisely 9:12 a.m., the ground rumbled. At first, people thought it was a truck passing through, but then the tremors intensified. The bakery's windows rattled. Hanging pots crashed in kitchens. Screams erupted as buildings began to shake. Panic surged through the village like a wave. Parents grabbed children, shopkeepers fled from falling shelves, and within seconds, the quiet town became chaos. Cracks ripped through stone walls, and rooftops buckled as the earthquake took hold. Bruno and Scout had been sniffing around near the old town library when it happened. As the earth groaned beneath them, they bolted. But just a few feet into their escape, a large slab of stone from the library's arch collapsed. It came down directly onto Bruno, pinning him in place. Dust clouded the air. Rubble clattered around them. Scout stopped and turned. He could have run, many animals had, but instead he circled back to where Bruno lay, half buried and trembling. Scout let out a sharp bark. No answer. Another bark. He began pacing, sniffing at the debris, and pushing small pieces aside with his paws. The shaking finally stopped, but the damage was done. The town was left in ruins, and rescue sirens began to echo through the nearby hills. Hours passed. People were being pulled from collapsed homes, and emergency crews had arrived from nearby towns. They were met with confusion, broken roads, and frightened faces. As one search team made their way toward the library's ruins, a faint but urgent sound reached them. Not a voice, but barking. The barking wasn't random. It was rhythmic, loud, and persistent. A rescuer named Daniel paused. "Do you hear that?" he asked his teammate. They followed the sound carefully, stepping over rubble, until they came to the partially collapsed library. There, standing on a fallen beam, was a dog with a white-nosed Scout. Scout barked again, his tail stiff, his eyes locked on them. As the rescuers drew closer, he growled lightly, not out of threat, but warning. He moved aside and circled, back to a specific spot near a pile of stone. Daniel crouched down. "There's something under here," he said quickly. He called for more help. Scout backed away just enough to let them work, his eyes never leaving Bruno. When they finally spotted a paw beneath the rubble, everyone went silent. The dog was alive, barely. Dust covered his fur, and his side rose and fell with shallow breaths. As they cleared the debris away, Scout pushed his nose toward Bruno's face and let out a soft whine. One of the rescue workers wiped his eyes. "I've seen animals run from danger," he said quietly, "but I've never seen one stay to guard a friend." Bruno was gently placed on a stretcher. Scout refused to be left behind and leapt onto the side, following his friend as they were taken to the emergency shelter. The villagers, who had lost so much that day, stood quietly as the two dogs passed. And in that moment, amid so much loss and fear, a story of friendship was already beginning to spread, one that no one would forget. The village of Elmsworth was in chaos. The earthquake had shattered homes, shops, and lives. Dust hung thick in the air, mingling with the smell of smoke from broken gas lines. People wandered the streets, stunned, some crying, others searching desperately for missing loved ones. The sun was beginning to set, but the rescue efforts showed no sign of slowing. In the center of the destruction, a small group of volunteers worked tirelessly. They had come from neighboring towns, carrying shovels, medical supplies, and a fierce determination to save anyone still trapped beneath the rubble. Among them was Daniel, the rescuer who had discovered Scout guarding his injured friend earlier that day. The memory of the white-nosed dog refusing to leave. Bruno's side stayed with him. Daniel and his team moved carefully through the wreckage near the old library. They were searching for anyone who might still be alive under the fallen stones. It was then that they heard a faint bark, quick and urgent, cutting through the silence that had settled over the damaged village. The barking came again, louder this time, and from somewhere nearby. "Listen," Daniel said, motioning for the others to stop. They exchanged looks and followed the sound cautiously. As they moved closer, the source of the barking came into view. Sitting atop a low pile of rubble was Scout, his white-nosed face bright with urgency. His tail wagged slightly, but his stance was alert, almost commanding. Daniel approached slowly, holding out his hand to show he meant no harm. Scout's eyes flicked toward him, then back to the debris. The dog let out a low growl, not threatening, but protective. He began to dig lightly with his paws at the stones near his feet. It was clear Scout was trying to show them something. "Looks like he wants us to dig here," one volunteer said. They gathered around, dropping their tools. To help move the debris, Scout stayed close, barking softly now and then to encourage them. His loyalty was unmistakable, and everyone on the team felt a sudden surge of hope. Underneath the rubble, they found Bruno, barely conscious and trapped by a heavy slab of stone. His breathing was shallow, and dust covered his face and fur. The rescuers worked quickly but carefully, knowing that any sudden movement could make Bruno's injuries worse. Scout didn't leave his side for a moment. He lay down beside Bruno, pressing his warm body against his friend, as if trying to share strength. As the sun dipped lower, a crowd gathered. Word of the rescue had spread fast, and villagers came to watch, tears in their eyes. Some whispered prayers, others murmured words of encouragement to the dogs. The bond between Scout and Bruno had become a symbol of hope amid the ruins. "It's incredible," said Maria, a local shopkeeper. "Even with everything falling apart, this dog refuses to leave his friend. It's like he knows they need each other." Daniel nodded. "Animals can sense things we don't. Sometimes they teach us about loyalty in ways we forget." The rescue team finally managed to lift the last heavy piece of stone, freeing Bruno. He was weak, but alive. Carefully, they lifted him onto a stretcher and carried him toward the makeshift medical tent set up on the village outskirts. Scout followed immediately, keeping close as if watching over every step. Inside the tent, vets and volunteers worked to stabilize Bruno. He had several broken ribs, a badly sprained leg, and cuts from the debris. But his spirit was strong, fueled by the presence of Scout, who refused to leave his side. Whenever Bruno stirred or whimpered, Scout was there, licking his face and resting his head gently against him. News of the rescue traveled quickly. Journalists began to arrive, capturing photos of the two dogs together and videos of Scout's protective behavior. People across the country watched in awe as this story of friendship and courage unfolded. Many said the dogs reminded them of the true meaning of devotion. But for the villagers of Elmsworth, Scout and Bruno were more than just news. They were a living reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and love could survive. And as the night settled in, with the stars shining faintly above the damaged village, the dogs lay close together, ready to face whatever came next side by side. The night in Elmsworth was cold and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the day. Most villagers had found temporary shelter, but the rescue efforts never truly stopped. In the emergency tent, dim lights flickered as volunteers moved quickly, tending to the injured, organizing supplies, and trying to keep spirits high. Bruno lay on a makeshift bed, wrapped in a blanket. His breathing was still shallow, but steady. Vet nurse Lena gently examined his broken leg, careful not to cause pain. Meanwhile, Scout sat nearby, alert but calm, his bright eyes never leaving his friend's face. The bond between the two dogs was undeniable, and the rescue workers often paused to watch. It was clear Scout wasn't just staying out of loyalty, he was trying to communicate something. Days earlier, when the earthquake had struck, Scout had done something remarkable. When he couldn't move Bruno from beneath the rubble, he hadn't left him to find help. Instead, he stayed by his side, barking and nudging the debris, as if begging someone to come quickly. That silent plea had saved Bruno's life. As dawn approached, Lena looked over at Scout. "He's trying to tell us something," she whispered to Daniel. The rescuers had been trying to piece together the full story, but Scout's behavior was different from what they had seen before. Scout suddenly stood and walked to the edge of the tent. He barked once, then turned back to Bruno. His tail wagged slowly, and then he paced back and forth. It was as if he was guiding the humans, showing them what to do next. Daniel nodded. Maybe Scout knows where Bruno got injured. Maybe there's more we need to find. Outside the tent, the rescue team regrouped. Daniel explained Scout's actions. "This dog isn't just a companion. He's part of this rescue," he said. "We need to trust him." Using flashlights and tools, the team followed Scout's lead toward the ruins of the old library. Scout sniffed the ground, stopping occasionally to dig lightly with his paws or bark softly. His determination was contagious, and soon the rescuers were digging again, focusing on spots Scout indicated. As they removed rubble from one corner, they uncovered something unexpected: a small box. Inside were papers, photographs, and a dusty journal. It appeared to belong to a librarian who had once worked there. Among the papers was a photo of a man and a woman with a dog that looked very much like Scout. Daniel carefully read from the journal. "It says here that the dog's name was Scout, and he belonged to the librarian who cared for this library many years ago. It seems this dog might be related to the same family." This discovery brought a new layer to the story. Could Scout be more than a stray? Had he once belonged to a family who loved him? The thought made everyone pause. Suddenly, Scout barked sharply and sprinted toward a narrow gap in the rubble. He stopped and scratched at the stones. Daniel crouched down and shone his light inside. Behind the rubble, a small tunnel led deeper into the debris. The rescuers exchanged worried glances. Could someone else be trapped down there? "Get the search cameras," Daniel ordered. The team carefully sent a camera into the tunnel. The live feed showed a small space filled with dust and broken wood, but no people. Then, faint movement caught their attention. It wasn't human, it was a small figure, shivering and weak. The camera zoomed in, revealing a tiny puppy, tangled and scared. Scout barked joyfully, wagging his tail as if relieved. The puppy's eyes met Scout's, and for a moment, the rescue team saw a family reunited in the middle of disaster. They called for more help and gently worked to free the frightened puppy. It was weak, but alive. As soon as the puppy was pulled from the rubble, Scout moved closer, licking its face gently. Bruno, now resting in the tent, stirred at the noise. Scout's attention to the puppy was clear. It was as if he was protecting not just Bruno, but this new little life as well. The rescuers knew this story was far from over. What had started as a desperate attempt to save one dog had grown into something much bigger, a tale of survival, family, and hope. The discovery of the tiny puppy hidden beneath the rubble brought a new wave of urgency and hope to the rescue team. Scout's protective instincts extended now beyond Bruno to this fragile new life, and the team felt inspired by the dog's unwavering spirit. But time was running out. Bruno's condition remained fragile. Though stable, His injuries were severe. The fractured leg, bruises, and exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Vets worked around the clock, monitoring his breathing, administering fluids, and preparing him for the surgeries he would need. Meanwhile, Scout refused to leave Bruno's side, lying close, occasionally licking his injured friend's face, offering quiet comfort. The little puppy, named Daisy by the rescuers, was placed in a soft crate with a warm blanket. She was tiny, barely a few weeks old, but full of life despite the ordeal. Scout kept close, occasionally reaching out with a gentle nose touch. Outside, the village was still in chaos. Roads were blocked, electricity was out, and many homes had been damaged beyond repair. Volunteers and rescue workers had their hands full, racing against time to find survivors trapped beneath tons of rubble. Each minute was precious, and every successful rescue felt like a victory against overwhelming odds. Daniel and his team gathered near the library ruins, coordinating their next moves. Scout's presence continued to be invaluable. His behavior was more than instinct. It was guidance. Whenever Scout barked or pawed at a spot, the rescuers took notice. Investigating carefully, Scout led us to the puppy, Daniel said with a mixture of amazement and respect. If he's this sharp, we can't ignore him. The rescue dogs, trained professionals working alongside the team, were deployed to follow Scout's lead. Together, they covered more ground, searching for signs of life beneath the debris. Scout's sharp senses and determination inspired a renewed focus among the rescuers. As the hours passed, the weather began to shift. Dark clouds rolled in, threatening rain. Rescue leaders knew that bad weather could slow down their work and make conditions dangerous. They had to act fast. Inside the medical tent, Bruno stirred. His eyes fluttered open briefly, and Scout immediately perked up, nuzzling him softly. Bruno's tail gave a faint wag, a small sign of life that lifted everyone's spirits. A bond between the two dogs was becoming a beacon of hope in the tent, filled with worried faces. Meanwhile, Lena prepared Bruno for surgery. The fractured leg required immediate attention to prevent permanent damage. The vet team worked quickly but gently, knowing that every moment counted. Outside, Scout stood guard near the entrance, alert to every sound. Occasionally, he barked softly, as if communicating with the other dogs or sensing something unseen. The rescuers watched in awe, amazed by his dedication and vigilance. Suddenly, Scout's ears perked. He raced toward a collapsed section of a nearby building, barking urgently. Rescue workers followed, using flashlights and tools to clear away debris. Scout pawed and scratched at a small gap, and beneath it, they heard faint whimpering. Careful digging, they uncovered a young girl, dirty and shaken but alive. She was trapped beneath fallen beams, unable to move on her own. The rescuers quickly freed her and carried her to safety. Scout remained close, wagging his tail as if proud of his discovery. The girl's grateful smile and soft words of thanks warmed the hearts of everyone present. Scout, however, remained humble. He nudged the girl gently with his nose, then trotted back to Bruno and Daisy, as if to say, "I'm still here." Back in the tent, Bruno was stable after surgery, and the medical team breathed a collective sigh of relief. Scout curled up beside him, and Daisy nestled into a volunteer's jacket nearby. The scene was quiet, but full of unspoken emotions, relief, gratitude, and the unbreakable bond between these four survivors. As night fell again over Elmsworth, the village slowly began to feel a flicker of hope. The earthquake had left scars that would take time to heal, but stories like Scout and Bruno's reminded everyone that even in the darkest hours, courage and friendship could shine through. The days following the earthquake were some of the hardest the village of Elmsworth had ever faced. Homes were destroyed, families displaced, and the daily rhythm of life was shattered. Yet amidst the ruins and despair, The story of Scout and Bruno grew brighter, a beacon of hope that inspired everyone who heard it. Bruno's injuries were healing slowly but steadily. The fractured leg was now set with a cast, and though he was weak, his spirit seemed unbroken. He often looked toward Scout, whose presence comforted him like a warm blanket on a cold night. Scout, too, seemed to understand the gravity of Bruno's condition and never left his side, offering quiet companionship. The little puppy, Daisy, had settled into the emergency shelter's routine as well. Despite her small size, she was lively and curious, exploring her surroundings with bright eyes and a wagging tail. Scout had adopted a protective role over Daisy, much like he did with Bruno. When Daisy tried to wander too far, Scout gently nudged her back, a guardian watching over his newfound family. Inside the medical tent, volunteers and vets had grown attached to the dogs. Stories of Scout's loyalty were shared among the rescue teams and villagers alike. "He's more than a dog," said Lana, the vet nurse. "He's a symbol of strength and love in this place of broken dreams." As the village slowly organized relief efforts, Scout and Bruno's story began to reach beyond Elmsworth. Local news crews had come and gone, capturing moments of tenderness between the two dogs. Videos of Scout refusing to leave Bruno's side circulated on social media, touching hearts far and wide. One evening, a man named Thomas arrived at the shelter. He introduced himself as a representative from a well-known animal rescue organization. He had been following the story and wanted to help. Thomas spoke gently to the team about finding a permanent home for the dogs, somewhere safe, warm, and full of love. At first, the idea of separating Bruno and Scout was unthinkable to the rescue workers. They insisted the dogs must stay together. Thomas smiled and nodded. "Of course," he said. "They'll stay as a pair. They've been through too much to be apart." Meanwhile, Scout's protective nature showed no signs of fading. One afternoon, as volunteers distributed food, Scout quietly slipped away. Concerned, Daniel and a few others went searching for him. They found Scout near the edge of the village, standing guard beside an old, collapsed fence. Behind the fence was a narrow path leading into the forest. Scout was barking softly, as if urging the rescuers to follow. Curious and cautious, they followed Scout through the trees, where they discovered a small, hidden clearing. There, tucked away from the chaos, was a small group of animals injured. Dogs, cats, and even a rabbit clearly abandoned or lost in the disaster. Scout's instincts had led the rescuers to this secret shelter. The animals were frightened but safe, and the team quickly arranged for food, water, and medical care to be brought to the clearing. Scout stayed close, his tail wagging as the animals were comforted and cared for. That night, as the village rested, Scout lay beside Bruno and Daisy, exhausted but fulfilled. He had done more than save his friends. He had helped save others too. For the villagers of Elmsworth, Scout and Bruno's story became a daily reminder of resilience and kindness. In a world torn apart by disaster, these dogs showed that hope could be found in the smallest acts of love and loyalty. And though the road to recovery was long, the bond between Scout and Bruno refused to break, inspiring everyone who saw it. Story of Scout and Bruno was no longer just a local tale. It had captured hearts far beyond the borders of Elmsworth. News outlets across the region shared images and videos of the loyal dogs who had survived an earthquake together. The videos showed Scout resting beside his injured friend, licking his wounds and guarding him like a guardian angel. The little puppy Daisy had become a symbol of new life amid the devastation. Social media exploded with messages of support, shares, and comments from people all over the world. Many were moved by the unwavering friendship between the dogs, seeing it as a symbol of hope, loyalty, and courage. Animal lovers, rescue groups, and everyday people sent donations to help care for the dogs and support the village's recovery efforts. Volunteers at the emergency shelter were overwhelmed but grateful. "We never imagined this would grow so big," said Lena, the vet nurse. "People everywhere are inspired by these dogs' story. It's brought a bit of light into a dark time." Meanwhile, Scout and Bruno's days were filled with quiet moments of healing and companionship. Bruno was gaining strength, but still required careful care. Scout remained by his side through it all, never leaving his friend's sight. Daisy, full of puppy energy, chased after the two older dogs, bringing smiles to those around. The local children, many of whom had experienced trauma from the earthquake, found comfort in the dog's presence. At the shelter, children gathered to pet Scout and Bruno, hearing the story of their bravery and friendship. For many, the dogs became a source of strength, teaching them about hope and kindness. One afternoon, as the sun cast a warm glow over the shelter, a television crew arrived. They wanted to film a special report on Scout, Bruno, and Daisy, capturing the dog's journey and the impact they had on the community. The crew interviewed volunteers, rescue workers, and some of the villagers who had witnessed the dog's rescue. Daniel, the rescuer who had first noticed Scout guarding Bruno, spoke earnestly. "These dogs didn't just survive. They reminded us all of what it means to care for one another, especially in the toughest times." As the story aired on national television, more offers began to pour in. Families and animal lovers from across the country wanted to adopt Scout and Bruno, promising safe and loving homes. The rescue team faced the difficult task of choosing the right place for the dogs, knowing they deserved the best. Throughout the media attention, Scout remained humble and focused. He still spent every moment close to Bruno, comforting his injured friend and watching over Daisy with gentle eyes. His loyalty was unwavering, a living lesson in devotion and courage. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived at the shelter that caught everyone's attention. It was from a family who had lost their home in a distant city, but had been inspired by Scout and Bruno's story. They wished to adopt both dogs, offering them a home filled with love and care. The rescue team carefully considered the offer. They knew the family's experience with disaster meant they understood the dog's journey. It seemed the perfect fit. Before long, plans were made for Scout and Bruno to be transported to their new home together. The idea of separation was unthinkable. The two had endured so much side by side. As the day of the move approached, the entire village gathered to say goodbye. Tears were shed, hugs exchanged, and hopeful wishes spoken aloud. Scout and Bruno, surrounded by people who loved them, seemed to understand that a new chapter was about to begin. The story of the dogs who refused to leave each other's side after an earthquake had touched countless lives and would continue to inspire many more. Through every hardship, their bond had been a shining light, a reminder that even in the darkest times, love and loyalty endure. The morning the rescue team prepared Scout and Bruno for their journey to a new home was filled with a mix of emotions. The village of Elmsworth gathered around the shelter, waving and offering gentle goodbyes. Children held on to Scout and Bruno's collars for one last time, while volunteers knelt down to whisper comforting words. The dogs, sensing the significance of the day, stayed close to each other, their bond as strong as ever. A family from a distant city, the Parkers, had offered to adopt both dogs. They had been deeply moved by the story of Scout and Bruno and wanted to give them a fresh start in a warm, loving home. The Parkers' young son, Jake, had once survived a natural disaster himself, and his family knew what it meant to face hardship and healing. When the Parkers arrived at Elmsworth, Scout and Bruno immediately took to Jake. The boy knelt down, his eyes full of kindness, and reached out a hand. Scout sniffed carefully, then nudged Jake's palm gently with his nose. Bruno, still weak but eager, wagged his tail in approval. It was as if they recognized a kindred spirit. The journey to their new home was quiet. Scout and Bruno rested side by side in the back seat, Daisy sitting between them, her tail wagging happily. The car hummed softly as it rolled through forests and fields, carrying the dogs toward their future. When they arrived, the Parkers' house was everything the dogs needed: a cozy yard, soft beds, and plenty of love waiting. Jake ran outside to explore with Scout and Bruno close behind. For the first time in weeks, the dogs felt safe and relaxed. Days turned into weeks, and the transition was smooth. Bruno's leg healed steadily with the help of the family's vet, and Scout grew more playful, his watchful eyes softening into gentle warmth. Daisy, the puppy, became a constant source of joy, racing through the garden and chasing butterflies. The Parkers' neighbors welcomed the new arrivals with open arms, touched by their story. Scout and Bruno became local celebrities, not for fame, but for the incredible example of friendship and resilience. They represented Jake, and the dogs formed an unbreakable bond. Each morning, Jake would take Scout, Bruno, and Daisy on long walks through the woods, telling them stories and sharing dreams. Scout, once a protective guardian, now allowed himself moments of carefree joy. Bruno, once injured and weak, gained strength and confidence with each passing day. The family made sure the dogs received the care and attention they deserved, but more importantly, they gave them love, the kind of love that heals invisible scars. Scout's loyalty, Bruno's courage, and Daisy's playful spirit filled the home with hope and happiness. The story of Scout and Bruno, the dogs who survived an earthquake and refused to leave each other, had come full circle. From the ruins of Elmsworth to a new beginning filled with promise, their journey showed that even the deepest wounds could heal with friendship and care. For the Parkers, the dogs were more than pets, they were family. And for Jake, Scout, and Bruno, were reminders that no matter what life throws at you, you can face it with courage, love, and a loyal friend by your side. Months had passed since Scout and Bruno left the village of Elmsworth, yet their story remained alive in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed their incredible journey. The village itself was slowly healing. Homes were rebuilt, trees replanted, and the sounds of children's laughter once again filled the air. But it was the story of the two dogs that became Elmsworth's most cherished memory, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of friendship. Near the center of the village, a mural had been painted by local artists. It showed Scout standing tall and watchful, Bruno lying peacefully at his side, and little Daisy playing nearby. Beneath the mural were the words, "Loyalty stands when everything else falls." The mural became a place where villagers gathered to remember, to tell the story to newcomers, and to find comfort during tough times. School children often visited, bringing flowers or drawing pictures inspired by the dogs. Their teachers used the story to teach lessons about courage, kindness, and the importance of standing by those you love. At the same time, Scout, Bruno, and Daisy were thriving in their new home with the Parker family. The bond between the dogs had only grown stronger. Jake and his family welcomed the dogs not just as pets, but as heroes who had survived more than anyone could imagine. Scout had grown calmer and more confident, no longer needing to stand guard at every sound. Bruno had regained his strength, running and playing like any happy dog should. Daisy blossomed into a joyful companion, often leading the way on their family hikes and adventures. Yet, the dogs never forgot where they came from. Occasionally, the Parkers would take Scout and Bruno on trips back toward Elmsworth. Each time, the villagers greeted them with warm smiles and open arms. Scout and Bruno's presence was a reminder of survival and the kindness that could arise even after disaster. One spring day, the village held a special celebration, an event to honor all who had helped rebuild and all who had shown courage. During the earthquake, the mayor gave a heartfelt speech, highlighting the story of the two dogs who had captured the world's attention. They taught us that true loyalty means standing by someone in their darkest moments, the mayor said. Scout and Bruno remind us that hope is never lost, even when the ground beneath us shakes. The crowd applauded, and children cheered as Scout and Bruno, now healthy and happy, wagged their tails proudly. Back at the Parker home, Jake looked at the dogs thoughtfully. "You guys are amazing," he said softly, rubbing Scout's ears. "You saved each other. You showed everyone what family really means." Scout licked Jake's hand, and Bruno nudged his shoulder. The dogs had faced unimaginable challenges and had come through stronger than ever, not just because of their survival, but because of the unbreakable bond they shared. The story of Scout and Bruno spread beyond Elmsworth, inspiring others facing hardship and reminding people everywhere of the power of love and loyalty. From the rubble of disaster to the warmth of a new home, their journey was a testament to courage, friendship, and hope. And so, as the sun set over the village and the Parker family's house, Scout, Bruno, and Daisy lay close together, safe, loved, and forever connected. Their story would live on, teaching generations to come that no matter what shakes your world, loyalty and love will always stand firm.